let's talk to Jackie. Hi, Jackie. You were on
Hello?
Skep Talk on the line. What would you like to talk about today?
So I would like to be discussing Jungian archetypes as evidence for the existence of the supernatural. By any chance, are you familiar with the psychologist named Jordan Peterson?
Yeah,
Yeah.
not a
Okay.
fan.
So basically, the analysis of religious archetypes I've heard from him is effectively that because each of us have certain personality traits that reflect, I guess you say, Jungian archetypes, like the idea that there's this collective unconscious and archetypes that ring throughout history. From a psychoanalytic perspective, the character traits and stories found in biblical stories are examples of revelation of these Jungian archetypes, and these are actualized effectively in the real world as part of our collective unconscious. And
What do you mean from a psychoanalytic perspective? What do you mean from a psychoanalytic
from a
perspective?
Jungian
Describe a psychoanalytic psychoanalysis isn't Jungian. Describe a psychoanalytic perspective for me. What's a
I thought Jung was
psychoanalytic
a
perspective?
psychoanalyst. Was that?
It was I believe it was like a
Sorry, what was your
anthropology
question?
sociologist. What is psychoanalysis? Didn't derive from you, derived from Freud. So describe a psychoanalytic perspective. You said that Jungian archetypes are evidence for a psychoanalytic perspective that God
Jungian
exists.
archetypes are evidence for the existence of the supernatural. I said they're evidence for the existence of the supernatural, not evidence for psychoanalysis.
From a okay,
but
sure.
I thought Jungianism was.
Sorry, I don't have whatever you wrote down in front of me, so I was going from memory. So the psychoanalytic perspective. What's a psychoanalytic perspective? Because that is what's propping up your claim. What's a psychoanalytic perspective?
Well, my understanding of basically Jungian psychoanalysis is that he believes personality traits are developed through a collective unconscious. And those are manifest.
That's not what psychoanalysis is
all behavior
at all. That's
okay,
not what
I might be wrong, but I thought Jung was considered a psychoanalyst.
No,
but either way, it doesn't matter what term we use. What I'm saying is, it doesn't matter. Okay,
it does. So if you're using that term
matter.
in order to demonstrate what you're saying, so from a so you're saying that from a psychoanalytic perspective wasn't an important part of the statement that you just made?
No, the term psychoanalysis is just a term. I'm just saying the theory that Carl Jung proposed about a collective unconscious, in my estimation, points to the existence of a supernatural transcendent force which has done revelation within the minds of human beings. That's all I'm claiming.
Okay, so you think that Jung proposed that there was a collective unconscious, and that means that there's a God.
Yeah, defining God as a being who transcends being and becoming, the object-subject dichotomy of the material world.
All right, well, let's get there. Let's you and I get there. So we can take Carl Jung out of the equation because who he was and what he proposed doesn't matter. So you're just saying that the collective unconscious exists, right? There's a collective unconscious, and that exists.
Yeah, and
okay, what's that? What does that look like? Describe
the collective
that
unconscious exists. So the collective unconscious, unconscious is the unconscious element of the human psyche, which manifests archetypes which are universal throughout human nature.
So the collective unconscious is us recognizing specific archetypes?
Yes, so these are
what archetypes specifically?
Of our
because
psyche.
An archetype is an infinitely descriptive term. Like you can almost anything can be an archetype, right? So what do you understand an archetype to be?
So I believe, archetype, we can go, it's hard to define. Archetype is like...
It's part of your definition of why God exists, so you should be able to define it. What's an archetype?
An archetype is part of, the way I would describe it, is an archetype is an idealized form that in human beings psychologically strive towards becoming. And
an archetype is just a typical example of something. No, that's not what archetype means. An archetype is just a typical example of something. That's what archetype means. It means
Yeah,
typical
but
example.
I'm talking about specifically archetype in the young. I'm talking about specifically archetype in the unconscious or
In the
archetype,
Jungian model, in the
in the
Jungian
Jungian
model,
sense.
it means specific example. So when Jung is
Yeah,
talking
and
about
I believe
archetypes, what do you think he's talking about? When Jung is saying
well,
that we recognize archetypes, what do you think he means from a sociological perspective?
I'm not a psychologist, right? I'm only 16 years old. I don't have a psychology degree, but to my understanding of Jung, to my understanding, he believes each human being is born with an aspect of the psyche that when they grow up, they will realize patterns or archetypes that are typical to other human beings throughout their culture, and then beyond the culture realm, going back far enough to human civilization as a whole. I might be wrong about that, but that's my understanding.
Okay, so what Jung is saying, for the most part, is that there are specific archetypes that resonate with people, right? So like the hero archetype is an archetype that consistently resonates with
Yeah,
people. Like it's a story about a typical type of person that is resonant, that will elicit a relatively common emotional reaction in people. So if you look at like the story
and
of
specifically,
Jesus, or you look at Superman, or you look at Hercules, or you
or
look like that,
Moses.
which is why Right,
Sure.
which is why we see them throughout time, right? So we see like the story of Hercules, and we see like
Yeah,
the Epic of
but
Gilgamesh, and we see the story of Jesus. We see Muhammad. You could say John Smith is the same type of thing, like hero's journey type stories. That's an archetype that's
yeah.
resonant with people. That's an
Can I just
archetype that
clarify one thing
people
real quick?
find aspirational, right? People look at that and they say, "Oh, like
Yeah, but
that is something that I recognize as potentially aspirational."
yeah, you're
You're with me
basically
there?
you're
Are we
repeating
in
yourself
agreement
now.
there?
So yes, we're complete. Yeah, we're in agreement. We're in
Yes,
agreement. I understand
just to
what
make
you're saying.
sure.
But what I'm trying to
Okay,
explain
all
is
right.
just to move on because we've already established
We
and we've
don't
already
need to
agreed
move.
about
No, no,
that.
no, no, no.
I kind of want to
We're
move.
not moving on, Jackie. Jackie, we're not moving on. We're not moving on because you're not gonna blow through to the next part of whatever it is that you were already ready to say. We're going to explore the concept that you already introduced. And the concept you already introduced was Jungian archetypes. And if Jungian archetypes are psychoanalytic, which I think there's a disconnect there, evidence or whatever for God, then we need to actually really suss out what that means. So Jungian archetypes we just described, and you agreed with me. So I won't repeat myself again because you
Yeah,
already called me out on that. I'm going to assume that you understand. So all he is saying is that these are aspirational archetypes that people recognize, and therefore what? Recognize and can affiliate themselves with.
okay.
And that's what he means by collective unconscious. He means that en masse, when people see this, there's a sort of collective agreement on a societal level that these are the types of stories that we have the same sort of reactions to and understanding of. That's what he's saying. And I agree
Yes.
with that.
So what I'm
Okay.
going,
And you agree with
what
that.
I'm going to be. Okay.
Therefore, God,
Can you
because
please
why?
let me speak? You're monologuing. So basically,
Jackie,
what I
I'm going to
believe
get
is
exceptionally frustrated with you because I didn't interrupt you. I was still speaking when you interrupted me to tell me I was monologuing. I don't want to mute you, and I'm usually one of the most patient. But if you are going to be condescending, you have picked the wrong pony, my friend. So,
okay.
therefore, God,
You've
because
spoken
why?
for 10 minutes, repeating yourself at least 3 times now, and you've added
What?
nothing to the
Jackie,
conversation.
therefore,
So
God,
what
because
I'm going
why? Your turn, go.
because so according to the Kabbalists, if you're familiar with Kabbalah, which is a form of Jewish mysticism, there is Sephiroth, which are basically apostasies of God's nature. What I believe is that when God created human beings, he gave them a soul which reflects these apostasies, and the Kabbalists list 12. I can't list the 12 because I'm not an expert in Kabbalah, but so the Hasidic masters talked about how although God's essence is the same with or without human beings, God's manifestation within reality requires a conscious entity. And I would argue that the hypotheses of God that the Kabbalists present are reflected in human character traits.
So
Okay,
you
cool. So,
believe
what soul?
something.
And also, that's the linchpin on that is soul. So now you have to prove the soul.
Yeah.
Carl Jung himself praised the Maggid of Mezrich, who was one of the first Hasidic rabbis.
I couldn't give one sweet rat fuck what Carl Jung said about shit.
Yeah.
So you
without
just
evidence.
said that in the Kabbalah that the something soul, right? So now you're saying that in order for me to take on board anything that you just said, I also have to buy into the concept of the soul that's smuggled into your description, right? So I don't believe the concept of the soul is viable, plausible, provable, and I actually believe it's directly disprovable. So now
disprovable?
you have to explain to me that the soul exists.
Where else do these Jungian archetypes originate, if not from the soul?
You really love Jung a lot. So I don't think Jungian archetypes exist because there's something that's recognizable as we live in a society, right? So society allows us to have these archetypes built in to our socialization. Like,
What's
so
interesting
we're
too is that
socialized into a society. No, you go ahead.
No, what's interesting
I'll take a
too
break.
is that Shannon explained all of this, but you wanted to shut her up so you can move on to the next thing, and now you're confused about it because
She
you just
explained
said
it, but
she was
she was repeating herself.
No, she wasn't, and even if she was,
I don't
you weren't
care.
listening
Yes, she
either
was.
way.
She said the
So
same thing about 3 times. Yes,
then
she
why
did.
did
She
you
said
need
the
to ask?
same thing about
Then
3
why
or
did
4
you need
times.
to ask? Then why did you need to ask about where it comes from, if not the soul? When she obviously already explained that. If you're not listening, you're not listening. It's one or the other. Either she's repeating herself and saying the
claimed that
same
they're
thing
well
many
received
times,
in society.
or you're not listening because you want to get on to your next point.
She claimed they're well received in society, but she hasn't explained why. She just made the assertion it is, but that's not an explanation for the process. I agree to well received in society. Why is that the case?
So we're socialized in society to recognize specific archetypes. So if I'm understanding, what you're taking umbrage with is the fact that you think that these archetypes, the only way that these archetypes would be unilaterally recognizable and related to is if there was something inherent in us that was like divinely placed inside of us that was cause for us to recognize them, right? So you're saying that there must be a soul, because otherwise, why would we look at hero stories? Why would we recognize these archetypes and see them as aspirational unilaterally? Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say there's strong evidence indicating that, and the reason, if you want to know why, is because these archetypes which exist don't just exist in similarly socialized societies. So, for example, the hero archetype may have existed in Europe, and it also existed in African cultures, and existed in Native American cultures, and existed in Chinese culture. And I highly doubt that somehow these same archetypes all went throughout all these same societies when they were massively geographically separated, unless there was some sort of divine backing beforehand.
So what do all of those societies have in common, do you think? And it's a really, the answer is almost too easy. Right. I was just going to say the answer is almost too easy. We're all human beings, right? Every single one of us.
Yes.
In all of the societies, all of us are human. So do you think that it might be the case that there's something else that all these societies have in common? What's
they're all
another,
human beings.
what's one other thing? They're all, what else? What else do they have in common that might be relevant here?
I mean, the hero archetype is just one example. I could think of other archetypes, but no, I don't.
No.
Other than them human beings.
Let's not get back on archetypes. Aside from just being human beings, one of the things that societies have in common is that everybody within that society needs to be able to coexist. In order to coexist in society, something like a hero who's willing to sacrifice himself for others is intuitively aspirational, right? That's intuitively aspirational. If you exist in a group of people whose entirety of survival is based on everybody cooperating and everybody protecting each other from any sort of exterior threat, and you have the type of person who is willing to step up to be that protector, they would be someone that is looked up to because they're protecting everybody else. And that it would also be something that's aspirational because other people would want to be looked up to. That's not magic. That's
I never
common
proposed the
sense.
existence of magic.
Well, you propose the existence of the supernatural, which is basically a synonym. So that is just something that makes sense. The rest of it seems like a really elaborate song and dance to explain something that's kind of intuitively really straightforward. And it smuggles in all kinds of other things. Like, we still didn't get back to the concept of the soul. Like, the soul's not a viable concept. You have to just believe it because it's the only thing that allows the rest of it to be packaged. But the soul itself isn't a concept that you could just wave away. It's an incredibly complex and nuanced concept that needs to be explored in and of itself before you can accept all the other things that you're adding on. You can't just go yada, 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 we have a soul, blah, 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 blah.
Well, for common agreement, how would you define a soul?
I don't think the soul exists. I don't think
But
that there's a
if it did
definition of the
exist, what
soul that's viable. I don't think there's a definition of the soul
the
that's
way
viable.
the way I personally define a soul is an aspect of human existence which is transcendently granted and that exists in each individual. That's not part of our material existence.
That's not part of our material existence. That would be the part that I have issue with. The rest of it just sounds like consciousness to me. And also that doesn't interact with your claim that there is a collective consciousness, because it would need to be linked to others, not just be individual. Otherwise, otherwise your own definition of the soul causes everything that you're talking about to fall apart.
Well, I believe we're all descendants of Adam and Eve.
What does that have to do with the collective consciousness?
Because I believe when God formed Adam and then formed Eve out of Adam's rib, that he blew in a soul, or in Hebrew, a neshama, into each human being, and that goes to each offspring. And I believe that soul has attributes of God's hypostases manifesting in people's character traits.
And they're all connected how? So that there's a collective consciousness.
Well, because if those hypotheses that are part of each of those character traits, because they're part of a soul, there's certain archetypes that their personality traits would similarly be well receptive to.
So that there's not a collective consciousness, then you're just describing that there's similarities that might make people receptive. They're not connected with each other in any way then, right?
Because don't we
Not in
see
any practical way.
similarities? Don't we see similarities in all species?
I would believe. What was that?
No, I was saying, don't we see similarities in all species? Like if you see a pack of lions in one area and a pack of lions in another, you're going to see similarities between the two. Do they have a soul then?
Correct.
They have a structure.
I don't believe God. I don't have faith that God blew in them a soul.
Then why do they have similarities in the way they structure their societies?
Personally, I'm an older creationist, so I do believe in evolutionary biology, and I do believe that they probably evolved to have certain adaptive traits which makes them similar. But that's not the same as consciousness or free will or archetypes which are manifest throughout history.
Why not?
I mean, it's just it's qualitatively different. A lion can choose something freely. It's an animal of instinct. It doesn't have rationality. It doesn't have reason. It doesn't have advanced communication. There are many qualitative differences between human beings and all other living organisms on Earth.
I don't know that that's necessarily true. There's differences for sure between each species, but no, they have as much decision-making abilities as we do, whether that's whether free will exists or not. Like they pretty much have that same level. They just might not have the same intellect in certain areas, but yeah, we have animal instincts as well. Like it's you're comparing, yeah, you're adding meaning to things that we do when other species do the same thing. Ants have societal structures. If you go from one anthill to another, they have different societal structures with a ruler, and like they have a queen, and then they have the worker ants. Is that because they have a soul that's directing kind of what they do in their society?
No, I don't believe it has soul. But I mean, I haven't heard of any actual Jungian psychologist. I haven't heard Jordan Peterson talk about like Jungian archetypes within non-human species. I mean, he has talked about like
Have you ever
lobsters and
listened to anybody
evolutionary
other than Jordan
psychology, and
Peterson? You keep
yeah,
referencing back to Jordan
William Lane
Peterson. I
Craig,
think you need
Carl
to read a
Jaspers,
couple of different books.
yeah, William
Like,
Lane Craig,
there's
Fyodor Dostoevsky, Ben Shapiro. There are a couple of others.
okay. Well, Ben Shapiro doesn't know anything about
Carl Jaspers.
psychology,
Yeah.
like at all. He's a lawyer.
Well, I've read plenty of
So
books,
Dostoevsky's been dead
but
for a
those
very,
are
very long time and was a
philosophers and
fiction
authors.
writer. So I see that you have one locus of information, and I think that might be a problem for you, is that you have one locus of information. So, and it probably sounded appealing to you, and I can understand why listening to Jordan Peterson can sound appealing, like at first glance, because he uses a lot of very, very fancy language and has a PhD, and therefore what he says must be well informed. However, when it's held up to scrutiny, um, a lot of it kind of falls apart. Like there are some things that you've said even today, like you're now kind of, not without even realizing it, special pleading a bit. You're saying that humans are a special kind of creation. All of the rest of everything on Earth and in the universe was created and evolved and has formed into societal structures, but is somehow very, very, very different and unique from humans. We are set apart for some reason. And
Well, I believe
that's a
God
strange
gave
thing to
us
say.
a soul. I mean, the
I'm so
Bible
sorry, I
doesn't
couldn't hear you.
claim animals have a neshama like human beings have.
I don't care what the Bible claims.
Yeah.
The Bible also says all kinds of other bananas, bonkers things. It says that the earth is held up on pillars. It says that you should throw babies against rocks. So what the Bible says doesn't mean a great deal to me when we're talking about reality. When we're trying to discern reality, I think using the Bible as our starting point is a hindrance, not a help.
I have
So when
read,
you're
or I've read some articles about more Freudian perspectives, but like the thing about Freud is that a lot of his theories about like how we're all these products of a material environment and all these things, and psychosexual development and the Oedipus complex, I think a lot of these things have been largely discredited by the broader psychological community.
They have. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. He was more like a jumping off point, like a founding father. He didn't have it all right, but he kind of kicked open the door and had got people to start thinking about it. And then other people came in and started doing all kinds of amazing work after him. And the field itself branched off in a multitude of directions, all the way up to neuroscience, which is my favorite personally. But which is why you won't hear somebody in the psychological field today, with few exceptions. Like there is some aspects of psychoanalysis that people are working in today that actually do have some viability, I think. Like you could look up as a neuroscientist who also works in psychoanalysis. His name is Mark Soms. He does some really great work, like integrating the two and like figuring out how psychoanalysis aspects of like interpreting emotions actually integrates with like the conceptions of that we have of consciousness from a neuroscience perspective. Like he does great work there from a psychoanalysis perspective. But Freud himself, I won't disagree with you. There's a lot of things that he said that I'm like, nah, bro. I mean, thanks for kicking down the door, but no.
Yeah.
I don't actually.
I
I'm
have
not
too
sad because
narrow
I
of a
want to have a
locus of information.
I'm so sorry. What did you just say?
I thought you said I have too narrow of a locus of information, but like what thinkers? Because like
I
it's
think
not just Jordan Peterson. Like I said, William and like Soren Kierkegaard. There are a lot of philosophers who have inspired me. A lot from the religious existentialist perspective, especially.
have they all informed your position here when it comes to talking about these archetypes? Because one,
No,
it sounds
well,
pretty
this
cut
is
and
mostly
paste
Young and
Jordan
Peterson.
Peterson. Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah,
And
this is
also
mostly
that's who you
Young
reference
and
back
Jordan
to is
Peterson.
either Young or Peterson in this conversation, which is why from regarding this concept, I'm not saying like in your life in general, but regarding this concept that we're having a conversation about right now, it sounds to me as though it's the idea probably came from and is informed by Jordan Peterson's like lectures and podcasts and whatever, and his idea of archetypes and his conception of the soul, which is like a muddled conception of the soul that doesn't actually make a lot of sense under scrutiny. And then that I think by Christians is mapped onto Christianity. But if you listen to some of the other things that Jordan Peterson says, he's not the type of Christian that a lot of he's more of a cultural Christian who has this fuzzy sort of concept that archetypes are evidence that God to him is like the most aspirational thing you can be. It's not like necessarily a tangible actual being. It's the ultimate aspiration, which isn't Christianity at all. And then he ascribes to Christianity because he thinks that that's the closest to through a series of archetypal stories that you can get to his concept. So he's almost kind of created his own religion, and Christians look at him and say, "He's one of us," and then they adopt his perspective because they think, "Yeah, he's fighting for us." But really, he's kind of creating this subset that is like just doesn't map onto Christianity at all. And a lot of like quote unquote real Christians look at him and they're like, don't. Like, I'm not sure if you saw his chat with Pints with Aquinas, who's a Catholic apologist, but he wasn't
I
pleased with
saw
him
that.
because, yeah, okay, so he wasn't particularly pleased with him because he thinks that Jordan Peterson is
Well,
actually kind of taking people away from
it's
Christianity to
it's
almost what seems
complicated.
like his own religion that is kind of taking taking Christianity and making it Jordan Petersonianity, but like
Yeah,
instead.
it's complicated because I've heard him
It
describe
is.
it as God being a being which is beyond being and becoming. So, like in philosophy, there's a classic debate: are things being or becoming? And like my understanding of Heidegger is he was more of a philosopher being. Nietzsche was more of a philosopher becoming. Jordan Peterson has become as a philosopher beyond being and becoming. So, but this is very similar to what Karl Jaspers, who was one of the teachers of Hannah Arendt, described God as. So he's a Christian psychiatrist from, I believe, Switzerland or one of those countries. And basically the idea is God is not an object or subject, and therefore the idea that you to expect to communicate God through empirical research is not existent. So I see a lot of parallels there. Not quite the same,
Well, I
but
mean, I agree with that.
I don't believe Peterson. But I don't
I
believe
don't think that you
Peterson
can
doesn't
find
believe
empirical evidence.
in a higher God. I believe that his concept of a higher God is just a little bit more sophisticated than, let's say, your standard evangelical type fundamentalist.
Okay. Well, I mean, it sounds like that he's converted you then. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like he's converted you, which is cool. All right, like that's your religion now. Is you've converted to
I've
Jordan
been
Peterson's
religious
version
for
of
a while.
Christianity. He is like the Paul of this generation, I swear to God.
Yeah,
Because
that's
Paul
true.
took what Christ did, and Paul, like for real, like Paul, the apostle Paul, took the message of Christ and the church that Peter was starting and was like, this is mine now. I'm in charge. I'm going to go out to the masses. And that's what Christianity functionally is now, is it's Paulianity. But now it's Petersonianity, where they're taking the concepts that, and it's just getting farther and farther away from the Bible into this really like obscure, abstract, like loosely references the Bible when it feels like it, just so that it can feel like it's connected to it, but actually has nothing the fuck to do with it whatsoever. And it's wild. But then when held under scrutiny, like when you hold somebody's feet to the fire, like if I said to you, Jackie, well, is the Bible true? You think Adam and Eve really existed? That's bananas. That's bananas, especially if you believe in evolution. That is
Yeah.
absolutely bananas.
I'm an older
I used to be in your
creationist. I
shoes.
believe.
Okay, yeah.
I believe God
Sorry.
created Adam and Eve, but
Go ahead.
Was that? Yeah, no, I believe Adam and Eve were literal physical people. It's just I believe that happened billions of years ago. So I believe that the age
Were they the
described in the
first people with
Bible
souls?
is longer than, yes. Well, I believe that, so
Were
it says
were
God
they the
created in
first
6
people made
days.
in the image of God?
They were the first 2 human beings made in the image of God.
Is sin a real concept, and was it derived from the Garden of Eden?
Yeah, I believe a place called the Garden of Eden existed.
And is that where sin was derived from, based on an act against God of gaining knowledge?
I mean, I believe originally God intended for human beings to live in paradise, but I believe we live in a fallen world because of that sin. But
Where
I
is
don't
sin
believe in
derived
the
from?
traditional concept.
Where does sin come from?
I don't believe in the traditional Christian concept of original sin. So I believe each human being can sin, but I believe that there's like the idea of a Yetzer Hara, Yetzer Tov, right? An evil inclination, a good inclination. I believe each human being is capable of good and is capable of evil. But I don't believe everyone
So
is born
there was never
in
a
sin in the
perfect
traditional
creation?
Christian.
God never made a perfect creation.
I mean, what do you mean by perfect? Garden of Eden was as perfect as human beings were ever idealized to get, but we don't
So
live in
God
Garden of
made us
Eden
flawed
times
on
now.
purpose? It wasn't through our choice that we became flawed. God made us flawed
If
on
God is
purpose.
defined as an all perfect being, how can God as an all perfect being create something which is equally perfect as He is? God is by definition more
If
perfect
he's
than
all
anything
perfect, he
He
could
creates.
easily create something just as perfect as he is, because he's all perfect. He could do whatever he wants. So, where where did the concept of sin come from? Because your only choices are, and both of them aren't great, that God created Adam and Eve, and also, if you believe in evolution, you would have to believe that we had no souls, no souls, no souls, no souls, no souls for like millions and millions of years or whatever. And then all of a sudden, an evolutionary branch came off, and it was humans. And then suddenly God was like, bam, you two get it. But evidently they were the only 2 left, because there would have been humans elsewhere at the same time. So if he donned those 2 with souls, then why didn't all of
I
the
mean,
other
I'm a
humans
little bit
that
agnostic
existed on
on
Earth, did
what
they not
aspects of
get
Genesis
souls?
are allegorical
And
or
what
not.
about the people that procreated with them, if it was just Adam and Eve? And was there no sin before then, or was there no humans before then? Because what happened to all the humans that existed before Adam and Eve? Was there no sin for them? And if sin was not an existent term and God created us, he created us sinful. He purposefully created us knowing that he was potentially going to condemn us. And that has interactions with like the problem of evil for sure, because he was like, I'm going to torture you forever if you mess up, but also I'm going to make it so that you're almost inevitably going to mess up in myriad ways. Like, lots of that has problems, right?
I don't believe in eternal hell. I don't believe in eternal hell. I believe in reincarnation. This is described in the Zohar and the
You're the
Zohar
wildest
Hakadosh
kind of
and
Christian.
in the Kabbalah. And I believe that in Olam Haba, all human beings which observe what God has commanded them will have share in the world to come. But again, these are complex theological issues, and I'm not, this great theologian. What I will say is that I believe God judges each human being to their ability. So a kid born in India who's a Hindu might not be judged the same as an Orthodox Jew born in Jerusalem who's raised very religious from birth. And that might not be burned for sort of agnostic person from Canada who's sort of Christian but didn't really have an education. Each individual has merit to them, and I believe God is not arbitrary. God is all-knowing, and God can judge each individual according to his will and to his proper judgment.
All right. It sounds like you've got a construction of religion that like it just isn't found anywhere, that you've kind of created for yourself. I'm going to let Trevor have the last word, and then we are going to let you go because we have to take at least one more call before the end of the show. So go, Trevor.
Yeah, I don't know. It's I had a question about how you think the soul works. I don't know if it applies now that I have this new information about your collage of religions. But because if we're able to have archetypes, sorry, because of the soul, then it does confuse me why there's more than one religion. Because if that's the main thing,
If you
God
want,
wants us to.
if you
Go
want to
ahead.
know a good representation of my beliefs, I would recommend reading Dr. Eric Neumann, who's an Orthodox Jewish Jungian psychologist. He wrote a book called The Origins of Consciousness and the Roots of Jewish Consciousness. They're both very dense books, but they cover a lot of basically what I believe.
Okay. Well, I guess, and the point too of trying to prove God through this, that I just want to say that didn't work on me, but maybe next time I'm on, you'll get me.
Yeah, I think you should call back again, but I think we should focus on something small each time.
Yeah.
Like, for sure,
Okay.
call back again.
I've called in before several times.
Oh yeah.
Oh, have we talked before, Jackie? I have a
No,
brain of
I've
a
called
fish.
other shows in line before.
Yeah.
I've
Okay.
called Forrest. I've called. Yeah.
Call and talk to me again. We'll have another chat. I host less because I suck and my life is busy. But call and we can have a chat and like pick a thing and we'll talk about the thing. But don't sass me anymore, Jackie. Let's be friends. We don't I don't need your back talk. All right. You have a good rest of your day, Jackie. I will talk to you again. Call the next time I'm on and we'll
Thanks for
explore.
calling.
We'll pick one finite thing and we'll talk about that and explore it. All right? Have a good rest of your day, Jackie.
Okay. You too.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
I thought I was going to have to mute that guy.
Yeah. I think
He
we
was-
all became friends in the end.
We're fine.
Yeah.
Jackie and I are going to be besties. We'll talk again.
Yeah.
All right.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jimmy Snow. I'm the executive producer of The Line. And at night, I sneak into Matt Dillahunty's house and I trade his cereals for other cereals. He comes out and he's like, wait, these are cereals I buy, but I swear I had different cereals. Anyway, would you like to support this channel or any specific show? You can do so over on Patreon or in channel memberships. There are special tiers for special shows or for the channel at large, and it helps us expand programming as well as hopefully very soon launch it in podcast form. Now, also, if you'd like to support, you can like, you can subscribe, you can leave a comment or a super thanks, which is a special highlighted comment that you pay for. Those are fun. And, screw the algorithm, go check out something over here, I suppose. Boy, I hope I can still put those icons there, because if I can't, this is going to look really stupid. I'm going to go buy some Cocoa Puffs and switch out Matt's mini wheats now.